Get out!" Her voice cracked like a whip across the tile. Ethan Harper froze. One hand still on the door, one foot still inside. The woman spun toward him, dark hair dripping white towel clutched to her chest, gray eyes blazing with something between fury and disbelief, and for 3 full seconds, neither of them breathed. Then she said very quietly, with the kind of controlled calm that is somehow more terrifying than screaming, "Do you have any idea who I am?" He didn't. He would. By Monday morning, standing in that conference room, staring at the nameplate on the table, he absolutely would. And he would wish desperately, completely, with every cell in his body, that he could take back that door. If that just stopped your heart a little, you're in the right place. Subscribe, hit the bell, and drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Stay with me, every single minute of this is worth it. The day started the way all disasters start, quietly and with the best intentions. Ethan Harper was up at 5:12. Not from an alarm. Alarms implied he'd been sleeping, and sleeping implied his brain had agreed to stop working for more than 90 consecutive minutes, which it hadn't done reliably since the night Claire died. He lay in the dark, stared at the ceiling, counted backward from 100, an old trick, Claire's trick, one of the dozens of small things she'd left behind. Like furniture he kept bumping into in the dark. And at 63, he gave up and got out of bed. He stood in Lila's doorway. That was the first thing always. Every morning, he needed to see her before he could move. She was 7 years old. She slept with her whole body, one arm flung sideways, one knee bent. Dark curls pressed against her cheek mouth, slightly open. Her stuffed elephant, Gerald, wedged under her chin like a very lumpy pillow. She looked exactly like Claire when she slept. The same total surrender to unconsciousness, the same small frown of concentration, like even in sleep, she was working something out. He stood there longer than he meant to. You're the reason he thought the way he thought it every morning, directing the thought at his daughter, like a compass finding north. You're the whole reason. Then his phone buzzed on the nightstand behind him, and the morning cracked open into logistics. By 7:45 they were almost ready. Almost. Because Lila had decided, with the serene finality of a person who has considered all available options and selected the most complicated one, that she needed to wear her mermaid swimsuit underneath her clothes. "That's going to be uncomfortable," Ethan said. "I'll be fine." "You'll be hot. I run cool." "You're 7. You don't run cool." "Daddy?" She looked at him with her mother's eyes, that amber brown, that particular depth, and her voice had the patience of someone explaining something obvious to someone they love despite their limitations. "When we get to the beach, everyone else will have to change. I will already be ready." A pause. "That's called efficiency." He stared at her. "Where did you learn that word? You say it. When you're on the phone with work." Her nose wrinkled slightly. "You say it like it's important." "It is important." "Then I'm being efficient." She spread her hands. Case closed. "Can we go?" He let it go. He was getting better at letting things go. Not good yet, but better. He grabbed the cooler, the beach bag, the folding chairs, the umbrella, and the small canvas sack Lila had packed herself, contents unknown, but weight suggesting a geological specimen collection. "What's in that bag?" he asked. "Supplies." "For what?" "Whatever we need." He decided at 7:46 in the morning that this was not the question he was asking today. They were 11 minutes from the exit when his phone lit up. Harmon Corp, Regional Transition Team. He glanced at it, looked back at the road, looked at it again, 3 messages stacked fast, the kind of stack that meant someone wanted an answer and wasn't prepared to wait for it. He put it face down on the passenger seat. It lit up again immediately. "Is that work?" Lila asked. "Don't worry about it." "You're doing the jaw thing." "What jaw thing?" "The thing where your jaw gets tight and you breathe out through your nose slowly." She demonstrated with devastating accuracy. "Like a bull." "I don't do that." "You're doing it right now." He made himself relax his jaw. He was doing it right now. The phone buzzed again. He picked it up for 1/2 second, 1/2 second, and in that half second, the exit to Crestwood Beach slid past in his peripheral vision like a door swinging shut. "Daddy? I see it. You missed." "I know. The GPS lady is going to..." "Recalculating," said the GPS lady with an inflection that somehow conveyed profound personal disappointment. "She's upset," Lila observed. "She's a computer program." "She sounds upset." "Lila, I'm just saying what I'm hearing." He took the U-turn. He put the phone in the glove compartment. He drove the remaining 14 minutes to Lot F because Lot C was full. Lot D was full, Lot E was closed for repaving, in the careful silence of a man who is counting and breathing, and choosing very deliberately not to do the invisible math. They got out of the car. He loaded himself like a pack mule. Lila materialized at his elbow carrying Gerald and the mystery supply bag and absolutely nothing else. "I would help," she said, "but my hands are full." "I can see that." Leadership is about delegation. He turned and looked at her. She looked back at him, innocent as sunrise. "You," he said, "are going to be either extraordinary or exhausting." "Why not both?" she said cheerfully, and started walking. The beach hit them like a wall of everything happening at once. Sound. First, the crash and pull of waves, children screaming with the uninhibited joy of people who haven't yet learned to modulate their happiness, seagulls, conducting their ongoing argument with the entire concept of property rights. Then the heat, the full coastal June heat bouncing off sand and bodies and the white aluminum of 1,000 folding chairs. Then the smell, salt and sunscreen, and something faintly, inexplicably, like funnel cake. Ethan stood at the edge of it all and felt, as he always felt in crowds, the particular vertigo of being surrounded by life and somehow adjacent to it rather than inside it. "You're here," he told himself. "You're physically present. That counts." "Daddy." Lila's grip on his wrist tightened like a vice. "Daddy, that seagull has an entire hot dog." He looked. A seagull stood on top of a nearby trash can with the full length of a hot dog crosswise in its beak, surveying the beach below it, like a general assessing terrain. Ethan said. "He's incredible. He's a seagull. He knows exactly what he wants, and he went and got it." Lila watched the bird with undisguised admiration. Nobody stopped him. The seagull turned its head. Its small yellow eye landed directly on Ethan with an expression that felt unreasonably like assessment. "Don't," Ethan told the seagull. The seagull looked at him for one more moment. Then it looked away. Lila patted his arm consolingly. "Come on. Let's find a spot before they're all gone." They found a spot. Not the spot. The spot was gone, occupied by a family with a shade tent the size of a small nation and a speaker playing something at a volume that suggested they had not come to the beach to hear the ocean. But they found a workable spot near the edge of the crowd where the density thinned and the sand had a little more room to breathe. Ethan set up with the focused efficiency of a man who uses logistics to manage anxiety. Umbrella deployed, chairs positioned, towels laid out with geometric precision. Lila sat on the wrong towel. "That one's mine," he said. "They look the same. Mine has more starfish in the corner." She looked, counted, silently moved to the other towel with the dignity of someone who has conceded a point without conceding the war. "Sunscreen," he said. "I know. Face first. I know, Daddy. Don't forget your..." "I know." She held out her hand. He squeezed sunscreen into it. She applied it to her face with efficient circular motions, then looked at Gerald. "He needs some too. Gerald is... he's part of this family. He comes to the beach. He gets sunscreen." She was already squeezing a careful pearl of SPF 50 onto her fingertip. Ethan watched his daughter apply sunscreen to a stuffed elephant with the solemn dedication of a pediatric nurse. Something moved in his chest, that familiar ache. The one that wasn't entirely grief, the one that was something else, something harder to name. Pride, maybe. Wonder. The specific, overwhelming love of watching a small person be exactly and completely themselves. His trunk, Lila murmured, working the sunscreen in. That's the most exposed part. You're right, he said. I usually am. She glanced up at him, quickly checking his face. You're doing the math again. I'm watching you. Watching me does the math. He sat down in his chair, looked out at the water. Sometimes. He didn't elaborate. She didn't press. That was one of Lila's gifts. She knew the difference between a silence that needed filling and a silence that needed company. She set Gerald carefully in the umbrella's shade and picked up her bucket. I'm going to find crabs. Stay where I can. See you. I know. I always know. She walked down toward the waterline with the purposeful stride of someone on an expedition that matters. He watched her go. His phone buzzed in the bag beside him. From S. Caldwell, incoming Regional Director, Harmon Corp. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he put it face down. Not yet. He heard her before he saw her. Daddy! Different voice, not the expedition voice, not the seagull voice. High compressed, pressed together. The voice that meant one thing and one thing only. He was on his feet before his brain finished processing the syllables. Lila was walking toward him from the waterline, both arms rigid at her sides, face carrying the expression of someone maintaining dignity under conditions of extreme physical distress. How bad, he said. Scale of 1 to 10. She thought about it for one agonized second. 11. The pavilion, come on. Now, fast. I told you before we left the car, she said through clenched teeth, shuffling fast beside him. You did not tell me before we left the car. I said, and I quote, Daddy, I might need a bathroom. That's not the same as... It was foreshadowing. Lila, I'm just saying for future reference. Can we do future reference after the bathroom? She shuffled faster. He cut through the crowd with one hand extended behind him for her to grab his body. A wedge moving through the mass of people, apologizing reflexively to anyone. He bumped. Sorry. Sorry. Coming through. My daughter needs to. The pavilion ahead. The blue arrow. The sign. He saw the door. He did not see the sign. He was looking at Lila. Her hand in his, her face the urgency of her, and he reached for the handle and pushed through and stepped inside. And stopped. The tile was cool. The space was quiet. And 3 feet in front of him, a woman spun toward the door with the precise instinctive movement of someone who had heard something they did not expect. She was wrapped in a white towel. Dark hair, dripping from the outdoor shower, pushed back from a face that had gone instantly completely still. Her eyes gray, the deep gray of November water, locked onto his, with the full force of a person who is processing something impossible. For 1 second, 2, 3, the world was exactly this small, a fluorescent light, the sound of water dripping, and those gray eyes. Then, get out, not screaming, not panicked, just 2 words low and controlled with a precision underneath them like a blade. He couldn't find a sentence. Any sentence. My daughter, I didn't the sign. Lila chose this exact moment to push past him completely undeterred and disappear into the nearest stall with the pragmatic indifference of a child for whom the mission supersedes all complications. The woman stared at the stall, stared at him. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I am so, he started. Do you have any idea, she said very quietly, who I am? The question hit him strangely. Not angry exactly, not a threat. Something else, something that sounded underneath the composure almost like exhaustion. Like someone who had spent a long time being known for something and was bracing for the performance of it. No, he said. Honest. Helpless. I don't. And I understand if you want me to. I'll go right now. I'll wait outside. Is she okay? The woman's eyes moved to the stall. From behind it, the unmistakable audio relief of a child's crisis resolved. She will be, he said. She's fine. I'm going. I'm so sorry. He backed toward the door. "The sign," the woman said. He stopped. "What?" "On the outside." She was still composed, still controlled, but something in her voice had shifted a fraction barely perceptible, like a door moved an inch. "It's small. You'd have to be looking for it." He looked back through the door. She was right. The sign was small, mounted at an angle half shadowed by the pavilion overhang. "I should have looked," he said. "You were looking at her." A pause that lasted exactly long enough to mean something. "That's not nothing." He didn't know what to do with that. He backed out into the sunlight, let the door close, stood in the bright, indifferent afternoon, with his heart running at a speed that was not strictly medically advisable, and waited for his daughter. Lila emerged 2 minutes later, entirely restored. Crisis resolved, universe rebalanced. She looked at his face. "You're the color of Gerald's nose." "Gerald's nose is red." "Yes." He exhaled. "Something happened." "I figured." She fell into step beside him. "Did you go in the wrong one?" "I went in the wrong one." "Was someone there?" "Yes." "What did you do?" "I apologized and left." Lila was quiet for a moment. Was she nice about it? He thought about 2 words, low and controlled. "That's not nothing." "More than she needed to be," he said. Lila nodded slowly. Good people are like that. He looked at his daughter. She was already looking ahead toward the water, toward the next thing, finished with the analysis and ready to move. He followed her gaze. He followed her back through the crowd. He absolutely did not think about gray eyes. He thought about them for the next 14 minutes. They reached their spot. Gerald was intact, unmolested, still technically SPF protected. Lila immediately inventoried the cooler. Ethan sat in his chair. Actually sat for the first time since they'd arrived and looked at the water. The ocean was doing what it always did. Arriving, retreating, arriving, retreating. Indifferent to the drama happening on its edges. Massive and patient and completely unconcerned with the invisible math. He felt himself exhale, just slightly. Just a little, but still. "Daddy," Lila said. "Those people over there don't have a spot." He followed her gesture. A family, parents, 2 kids, a folded umbrella, the general air of people who had been walking for too long and were running out of optimism. "They'll find something," he said. "That lady found something." Lila's voice was different now, lighter, with the particular undertone of a child about to make a social decision. "Right over there." He looked. He knew immediately. He didn't understand why he knew. Some shift in the quality of his attention, some frequency he'd been tuned to without realizing. His eyes found her through the crowd, the way they would find a landmark naturally without searching. She was 15 feet away. Dark shorts, faded blue t-shirt, sunglasses pushed up into damp hair. Setting up a folding chair with the efficient, unhurried movements of someone very accustomed to doing things themselves. She hadn't seen him. He had approximately 4 seconds to decide how to handle this. "Hi," Lila called. The 4 seconds evaporated. The woman looked up, found Lila first immediately warmly, then followed Lila's gaze to him. The moment lasted about as long as a heartbeat. Then something moved at the corner of her mouth. Not performance. Not the managed smile of someone being polite. Something real. "Small beach," she said. "Apparently," he said. Lila cupped her hands around her mouth. "We have room. Daddy's chair is empty because he doesn't sit in it." "I sit in it," he said. "I have been watching you for 2 hours," Lila said. "You have not sat in it once." He looked at his chair. He had not sat in it once. He looked at Sophie. She was yes. Absolutely. She was trying not to laugh. "Would you?" He gestured at the empty space beside his unused chair, aware that he was probably definitely making a decision he couldn't take back. "I mean, if you wanted company, you don't have to. I understand if—" "Okay," she said. Simple, clean, no performance. He moved the bag. She set up her chair, not too close, not too far. a careful distance that felt like a question rather than an answer. She sat. He sat finally, actually sat, and for a moment they both looked at the water. "I'm Ethan," he said. "Harper, since we skipped introductions." "Sophie," she said. "We definitely skipped introductions. I'd like to say that's not how I usually enter rooms. Start conversations. A beat. How do you usually start conversations?" she asked. He thought about it. "Badly," he admitted. "Usually with logistics, weather contingencies, exit strategies." "That sounds exhausting." "It is." He said it before he thought about it. Then, "I mean, no, She stopped, started again. "I meant for you, not as a criticism." She paused. "I recognize it." He looked at her. She was still looking at the water. Her jawline was precise. Her hands were still in her lap. "Yeah," he said. "I spent a long time being the most prepared person in every room," she said evenly, like she was reading a fact rather than disclosing one. "It helps. It also—" A pause. "Costs," he said. She turned and looked at him. Something shifted in her expression, small, controlled, but real. "Yeah," she said. "Costs." "Daddy." Lila's voice arrived from the waterline at maximum volume electric with urgency. "Come here right now, there is a situation." They were both on their feet simultaneously, automatic parallel, and crossed the sand to where Lila was crouched at the edge of a shallow tide pool, pointing into the water with a hand that was shaking slightly with excitement. "Look," she whispered. "Look at him. Look at him." A crab. Medium-sized, moving along the floor of the pool, with extraordinary authority, claws raised, absolutely indifferent to the audience it had acquired. "He's perfect," Sophie said softly. Lila's head snapped up. She looked at Sophie with the expression of someone who has finally, after years of effort, been correctly understood. "He is. He's completely perfect. Daddy said we'll see when I told him crabs were the best part." Sophie glanced sideways at him. "You said that I was maintaining neutral expectations." "About crabs." "About the day generally. Crabs were included." "He does that," Lila told Sophie with the air of someone providing important context to a new friend. "He maintains neutral expectations, so he doesn't get disappointed." She paused. "But I think it also means he doesn't get as happy." The words dropped into the air and stayed there. Ethan looked at his daughter. 7 years old. Dark curls and her mother's amber eyes, crouched at a tide pool in her mermaid swimsuit and her ocean explorer shirt, telling a woman she'd met 40 minutes ago something that was more accurate than anything he would have volunteered. Sophie was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful. "That's a very smart thing to notice." "She told me," Lila said simply. "My mom. She said to watch for when people hold themselves back from things." She reached into the water very gently and held a finger just in front of the crab. It raised one claw, considering. "She said the brave thing is to let yourself want things." The crab touched her finger. She went perfectly still, eyes wide, barely breathing. Ethan couldn't speak. He didn't try. Sophie looked at him, not sideways this time, directly, the way you look at someone when you've seen something true. "She sounds," she said quietly, "like she was extraordinary." "She was," he said. Just that. Just 2 words. He hadn't said them out loud in a while. Not just "she was gone," or Lila's mother, or the careful managed versions he used in contexts where he had to be professional and functional. Just "she was." Present and past contained in 2 syllables whole. The crab moved on. Lila watched it go with the reverence of a witness. "I'm going to follow him," she announced, standing up and taking the side of the pool with great purpose. "For research." She moved away. They watched her. The tide pool stretched ahead, catching light. The crowd noise was different here, softer, mediated by water and distance. "She's going to be someone," Sophie said. "She already is," he said. They stood at the edge of the water watching his daughter conduct her research, and the afternoon light shifted, and neither of them moved. And the thing that had started in a restroom doorway, in shock and embarrassment, and 2 words that were more generous than he deserved, continued quietly into something neither of them had a name for yet. His phone buzzed in his back pocket. S. Caldwell, incoming regional director. He didn't reach for it. They walked back slowly. Lila ranged ahead, keeping the crab in her peripheral vision with the dedication of a field researcher. "Coffee," Ethan said back at their chairs. Sophie looked at him. "From a beach bag. I run a tight operation." He unzipped the side pocket of the cooler and produced a thermos and 2 paper cups. He'd packed it this morning during the logistics phase when he'd accounted for every contingency except walking through the wrong door. She accepted a cup, wrapped both hands around it, took a sip. "That's good," she said with what seemed like genuine surprise. "You thought it would be bad." "I thought it would be gas station coffee." "I would never." "Of course not." She looked at him with something dry and warm at the same time. "You're the kind of person who packs good coffee for a beach day. I'm the kind of person who over-prepares. There are worse things to be." She drank again. Better than the alternative, which is under-preparing. Her voice was light, but underneath it something that had been earned. Thinking you have more time than you do, assuming something will just work out. She looked at the water. "I used to be better at that than I am now. At improvising. At trusting that things would be okay without my involvement." She said it like she was confessing to something. "I used to be quite good at letting things just happen, when I was younger." A pause. "Before." He waited. "My father died when I was 14, she said with the precision of someone who has made peace with the sentence itself, even when the grief beneath it remains imprecise. "I became very organized, after that, very competent. It's a useful quality." The last 3 words came out with a faint dry shadow. "People trust competence. It's also—" She stopped. "Lonely," he said. She looked at him sharply. Then slowly, the sharpness softened. "I was going to say exhausting," she said. "But yes, both." "It's good armor," he said, thinking of himself. "Competence. It keeps things at a distance. It keeps you in control. Which feels like the same thing for a while, until it doesn't." She looked at him. "Until you realize you've been managing everything for so long that you've forgotten how to just—" She gestured at the beach, at Lila, at the water, at the whole indifferent afternoon. "Be somewhere." "Yeah," he said. The word came out soft. "I'm familiar." They sat with that, not uncomfortably. The way you sit with something true. "How long?" she asked, not cruel, not clinical, just the question. 3 years in February," he said. "Car accident. She was—" He stopped, picked a different path. "Lila was 4. She remembers some things. Is that better or worse?" "I ask myself that every day," he said. "I don't have an answer." Sophie nodded. She didn't say "I'm sorry." She didn't say anything for a moment, and the not saying felt like the most generous response available. "She teaches you things," Sophie said, finally nodding at Lila, who was now narrating something to herself while crouched over the water. "Your daughter?" "Daily," he said. "Sometimes hourly." "That's good." She wrapped both hands around her cup. "I think we get teachers when we need them. We just don't always recognize them." A pause. "Usually because they're small and covered in sand and following a crab." He laughed, real unguarded, a sound he barely recognized as his own. "Yeah," he managed. "Usually." She smiled at him, and it was different from the other smiles, fuller, less careful, like something she'd stopped managing for a moment without quite meaning to. He thought, "I don't know who this person is." He thought, "I want to." His phone went off again. 3 times. Fast. The particular buzz pattern he associated with escalation, someone moving up the urgency ladder. He looked at Lila, who was fine, thriving approximately 15 feet away. He looked at the phone. Harmon Corp. Urgent pre-transition briefing. Monday 8 a.m. All regional staff. Attendance mandatory. S. Caldwell, incoming regional director. He read it twice. Work, Sophie said. Yeah. He put the phone face down. New director, some kind of transition. They've been sending these since last week. Sounds stressful. It's fine. The reflexive answer, the armor answer. He caught himself. I don't know, maybe. He put the phone in his bag. I'm trying not to do the invisible math today. She tilted her head. Invisible math? My daughter's term, for when I'm physically present but mentally calculating every variable in a situation. He paused. She says I look like a bull when I do it. Sophie considered this carefully. She's not wrong. You had that look when you... She stopped. When I walked through the wrong door. When you stood in the parking lot after. Her voice was very even. You had that look, like you were running the numbers, on how badly you'd messed up. She paused. For what it's worth, the numbers weren't that bad. He looked at her. The late afternoon light had shifted. It was angling lower now, catching the edge of her face with the particular gold of mid-afternoon June, and she was looking at him with those deep gray eyes and saying things with a precision that bypassed every layer of competence armor he'd been wearing for 3 years. Why are you being kind to me? The question was out before he'd decided to ask it, honest and slightly too direct. I walked into your bathroom. You'd be well within your rights to... I told you. She looked down at her cup. The sign was small. You were looking at her. A beat. And... She stopped. And what? She took a breath. You looked when you backed out of that door. You looked like someone who was carrying more than their arms were holding. She glanced at him. I recognize that too. The wave came in, retreated, came in again. Daddy, Lila called from across the sand. He turned around. He's coming back. Come see. They both stood, together automatically without negotiating it. They walked across the sand toward his daughter, toward the crab, conducting its return journey toward the tide pool, catching the last of the afternoon light, and Ethan Harper did not do the invisible math. He was there, just there, in the unremarkable, ordinary, quietly extraordinary moment. His phone was in his bag. The name on the last message was S. Caldwell. He didn't know. And for now, for just this afternoon, he didn't need to. But Monday was coming, and Monday would change everything. The crab turned around 3 times before Lila declared him directionally challenged but emotionally committed, which made Sophie laugh so hard she had to put her coffee cup down. Ethan watched it happen, watched Sophie's composure. That careful, precise composure she wore like a second skin crack. Open for exactly 4 seconds of genuine, unguarded laughter, and felt something in his chest. Do something he wasn't ready for. Not a dramatic feeling. Not the kind that announces itself. Just a quiet internal shift, like a lock turning over that he hadn't known was locked. He looked away before she caught him looking. Lila did not look away. Lila was watching Sophie with the focused, unblinking attention of a child who has decided someone is worth studying. You should laugh like that more, she informed Sophie. Sophie blinked. Like what? Like you forgot to be careful. Lila said it the way she said most things plainly, without cruelty, like she was reading the weather. Most grown-ups laugh carefully, like they're checking if it's okay first. A silence settled over the 3 of them. Ethan looked at his daughter. Sophie looked at his daughter. The crab moved along the bottom of the pool, indifferent and magnificent. She's right, Sophie said finally to Ethan. Quiet, like she was confessing something small and real. She usually is, he said. It's exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Lila beamed and went back to the crab. They drifted back to the chairs without discussing it, just turned and walked side by side close enough that the distance between them felt deliberate in a way it hadn't an hour ago. He handed her coffee. She took it. Their fingers didn't touch, but almost. He noticed the almost. He filed the almost away in the part of his mind he wasn't examining too closely. "So," Sophie said, settling into her chair, "what do you do when you're not conducting beach logistics and walking into the wrong bathrooms?" "Regional operations manager." He said it the way he always said it, functional, accurate, carrying none of the complexity underneath. "For Harmon Corp. 8 years. Something moved in her expression. He couldn't read it clearly. A flicker there and gone quick as a fish turning in water. 8 years, she said. "It's a good job. Stable. Benefits. I needed stable after—" He stopped. "After. It was a good choice. But—" He looked at her. "I didn't say but. Your voice did." He was quiet for a moment. The waves came in. "But it wasn't what I planned on doing, before. I was going to—" He shook his head slightly. "Doesn't matter." "It might? Architecture," he said like the word cost something. "I was 2 years into a master's program when Lila was born. Then Claire got sick. She was sick for a while before, and I needed income and stability and health insurance and all the things that architecture school wasn't providing, so—" He shrugged. One shoulder. "I made the practical choice." "And you're good at it." "I'm excellent at it," he said with the particular flatness of a person who has made peace with something they haven't actually made peace with. That's almost worse. Being excellent at the thing you didn't choose. Sophie was quiet for a long moment. "I know that feeling," she said. "Exactly." He looked at her. "You're a CEO." The flicker again, faster this time. "I'm yes, regional director, currently." She wrapped both hands around her cup. "I started in finance. My father's field, he'd been a banker, and after he died I thought—" A breath. "I thought choosing his field was a way of keeping something. Of him. It turned out I was good at it, so I kept going, and being good at something has a momentum to it, doesn't it? You get promoted. You get more responsibility. People trust you with bigger things, and one day you look up and you're 41 years old and you're running a regional operation for a corporation, and you can't quite remember." She stopped. "When you stopped choosing and started just continuing," he said. She turned and looked at him fully, like he'd said something that required her full attention to process. "Yes," she said. "Exactly that." The afternoon was shifting around them, the crowd thinning at the edges as families packed up, the light going amber and long, the noise softening into something more manageable. His phone was in his bag. The name S. Caldwell was on his screen. Neither of these things existed right now in this particular pocket of afternoon. "What would you have done," he asked, "if not finance?" She didn't answer immediately. She looked at the water, and her face did something complicated, a calculation maybe of how honest to be with a person she'd known for 2 hours and 40 minutes, starting from a women's restroom. Then she made a decision he could almost see her make. "Medicine," she said. "Pediatrics." A pause. "I wanted to work with kids who were sick, kids who needed someone in their corner." She glanced at Lila, who had relocated from the tide pool to a nearby stretch of sand and appeared to be conducting some kind of private engineering project involving a bucket and entirely too much ambition. "I was good with kids. I still am, actually. I went a different direction." "For your father." "For my father." She said it evenly. "And because being a doctor requires an enormous amount of trust. You have to let things be uncertain. You have to not know the answer for a while and tolerate that." A small dry pause. "Finance rewards certainty, clear returns, quantifiable outcomes." She looked at her hands. "I'm very good at quantifiable outcomes, and very bad at uncertainty, professionally impeccable at uncertainty. Personally—" She stopped, made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "Personally, I have some room for improvement." Ethan felt the thing in his chest do the thing again, more insistent this time. He looked at a woman he'd walked in on in a towel 2 hours and 45 minutes ago and thought, "She is telling me something true." something she doesn't tell people, and underneath that thought quietly running like a current. Why is she telling me? Daddy! Lila's voice arrived at full volume, crackling with a different kind of urgency this time, not crisis, but discovery, which in Lila's internal hierarchy was possibly even more pressing. Daddy, there is a child over there who is doing it wrong. Both adults turned. Down the beach, maybe 20 feet away, a boy roughly Lila's age, possibly a year older, was attempting to build something in the sand, with the focused, furious energy of a person whose architectural vision was exceeding their technical execution. His sandcastle was listing hard to one side. He was adding more sand to the leaning wall, which was making it lean further, and his expression was cycling rapidly through determination, confusion, and the early stages of existential distress. He needs structural support first, Lila said, arriving at Ethan's elbow with the gravity of a consultant. He's adding material to a compromised foundation. That's not how you fix it. Ethan looked at the boy, looked at his daughter. Do you want to? I'm going to help him, she said in the tone that meant she'd already decided and was informing him as a courtesy. Is that okay? Ask him if it's okay. Obviously. She looked faintly offended by the suggestion that she might not. They watched her cross the sand toward the boy. Watched her approach with her bucket and shovel, and the careful openness of a child who has been taught that other people's business belongs to them until they're asked to share it. She stopped a few feet away, said something. The boy looked up, said something back. Lila tilted her head listening. Then she crouched down and set her bucket down and began gently methodically with commentary he was too far away to hear, to show him something about foundations. She goes right at people, Sophie said, softly, wondering. She always has. His voice was rough at the edges in a way he wasn't managing. Claire was like that. She could walk into a room full of strangers and just connect, instantly, like she didn't have the social reflex that tells you to stay back. He watched Lila demonstrate something with her shovel. The boy nodded vigorously. Lila got it from her. I didn't get it from anyone. I kind of watch from the edges of rooms. I know the edges of rooms, Sophie said. Professionally good at entering them, he said. Personally. Some room for improvement, she finished, and they looked at each other, and it was the closest thing to being understood that he'd felt in 3 years, and it scared him so thoroughly that he looked back at the water immediately. The boy's name, they discovered 4 minutes later, was Max. He was 8, not 7, a fact Lila considered acceptable, and he was at the beach with his mother, who arrived approximately 90 seconds after Lila and Max had established what appeared to be a full bilateral agreement about sandcastle architecture, renovation strategy, and whether crabs could theoretically be trained. His mother walked up to the adults with the wary expression of a woman assessing a situation involving her child and 2 strangers. She was tall, angular, with close-cropped natural hair, and the look of someone who made fast, accurate assessments of people and situations. Her eyes went to Ethan, then Sophie, then the kids, then back. Max. Not a question. They're fine, Lila called without looking up. We're fixing the castle. His foundation was compromised. I'm helping. The woman stood very still for a moment. Then she looked at Ethan. Did your daughter just... Yeah, he said. She does that. I'm Ethan. She's Lila. That's Sophie. He gestured. The woman's expression shifted, the wariness not gone, but reclassified. Diana, she said. She looked at the kids. Max was now taking direction from Lila, with the focused trust of someone who has recognized expertise and is smart enough to defer to it. He's been trying to build that thing for 40 minutes. She's a structural purist, Ethan said. She's 8, 7. She would like you to know that the distinction matters. Diana looked at him for a moment, then at Sophie, then back at the kids. Something in her posture eased. You mind if I... She gestured at the stretch of sand near them. Please, Sophie said. Diana settled onto the sand cross-legged in the no-fuss way of someone who doesn't require a chair to be comfortable. She pulled out a water bottle, drank, watched her son take instruction with the focused equanimity of a parent who has learned to appreciate whatever is currently working. "Long day?" Ethan asked. "Long week," Diana said. "Long month, honestly." She looked at the water. "His father and I were separating. Max doesn't fully understand yet, but he understands enough. He needed to be somewhere with no walls today." A beat. "So did I." The honesty of it landed simply the way Diana seemed to do everything without ceremony, without softening. Sophie made a small sound of acknowledgement. Ethan said nothing because there was nothing useful to say, and sometimes the best response to a true thing is just to let it be true. "The beach is good for that," Sophie said finally. "All that open space. Hard to feel cornered by something when the horizon's right there." Diana looked at her. Something shifted in her assessment. "Yeah," she said. "Exactly." The four of them, 3 adults and 2 children conducting a construction project of increasing ambition down the beach, settled into a kind of accidental community, the way people sometimes do when circumstances strip away the usual protocols. They talked in the way that strangers talk when they've all agreed without discussing it to be real, not performing, not networking, not managing impressions. Diana told them about her job, middle school science teacher 12 years currently running on coffee, and the stubborn conviction that 13-year-olds were secretly interesting. Sophie listened with the quality of attention that made people feel heard rather than processed. Ethan watched Sophie listen and noted in the part of his mind that was always noting things how rarely he'd seen that quality, the actual ability to receive what someone was saying without simultaneously calculating the response. Claire had that. He used to have it before. He was aware that he was making comparisons he shouldn't be making about a woman he'd known for 3 hours. He was aware, and he did it anyway quietly in the space behind his ribs. "What about you?" Diana asked Sophie after a while. "What do you do?" The flicker. Again. Faster now. And this time Ethan caught the specific quality of it, not discomfort exactly. Something more like a calculation. A moment of decision. Corporate, Sophie said. Even. Smooth. Regional management. A pause that contained something. Transition work currently. Moving into a new position. Sounds stressful. It has its moments. She looked at the water. "I start Monday." Monday. The word landed on Ethan's chest with a small, inexplicable weight. He didn't examine why. Lila arrived at that moment, sand-covered and triumphant, dragging Max by the wrist with the confident authority of someone presenting an ally. "The castle is saved," she announced. "Max did the interior walls. I did the external reinforcement. It's a collaborative structure." Max behind her was grinning with the particular delight of a child who has found an unexpected friend and is still slightly amazed by it. He had his mother's eyes dark and direct, and his own expression, which was open in the way that some children are open, like they haven't learned yet to edit themselves before the world sees them. "Cool," said Diana. "Very cool," said Ethan. "Impressive load-bearing capacity," said Sophie. Lila pointed at Sophie. "She gets it." Max looked at Sophie with sudden interest. "Do you know about buildings?" "I know a little," Sophie said. "Sophie knows a lot about a lot of things," Lila said with the authority of someone who has known a person for 3 hours and assessed them completely. She just doesn't always say so. Sophie looked at Lila for a moment. Something crossed her face. Unguarded private there and gone in a second that Ethan recognized as the expression of someone being seen more clearly than they expected. "You're perceptive," Sophie told Lila. "My mom taught me," Lila said simply. She said it without grief, without the performed carefulness that adults brought to the subject. Just fact. Clean and whole. She said if you watch people's hands and their eyes, you can tell what they're actually thinking. She looked at Sophie's hands, then at Ethan's, then back at Sophie. "You both keep almost reaching for your cups when you're not sure what to say. Did you know that?" Neither adult spoke. Max looked between them with the bright assessment of a child who is following the subtext without quite understanding what the text is. "Okay, Diana said with the decisive energy of a mother who has recognized a moment that needs redirecting. "Who wants to find more crabs? I saw some good tide pools further down." "Me," said Max at maximum volume. "Me," said Lila with tremendous dignity. They moved. The 4 adults. 3 technically Diana, herding 2 children, followed the shoreline, and Ethan found himself walking beside Sophie again, which seemed to be where he kept ending up, which seemed increasingly like something other than coincidence. "She watches hands and eyes," Sophie said, not quite to him. "She does," Ethan said. "She got it from her mother." What else did she get from her? He thought about it. The directness. The way she walks into things head first. The belief that people are worth the effort of really seeing. He paused. The laugh. She has Claire's laugh. That kills me sometimes in the best way. And what did she get from you? He opened his mouth, closed it. The invisible math, he said finally. The over-preparation. He stopped. The fear that if I stop managing everything, something will fall apart. She doesn't seem afraid, Sophie said. No, he agreed. She really doesn't. Maybe she got the lesson without the wound, Sophie said quietly. Maybe that's what you gave her. The caring without the armor. The armor. They walked for a moment, the sound of Diana and the children ahead of them, the ocean doing its ancient, indifferent arriving and retreating. Can I ask you something? Sophie said. Yeah. When was the last time you did something without planning it first? He thought about it. Genuinely, actually thought about it. Ran backward through the months, through the logistical scaffolding of his days, the lists, and the systems, and the contingency plans, looking for a moment that was just instinctive, unmanaged. I walked through the wrong door, he said. She turned her head, looked at him. That almost smile again, the real one, the one she hadn't started managing yet. You did, she said. First unplanned thing in 3 years. How did it go? He looked at her. Better than I expected, he said. Considerably. The almost smile became real, full, unguarded. It lasted only a moment before she looked away, but he'd seen it, and he was keeping it in the same place he'd put the almost touch from earlier, building a collection of things he wasn't examining, but also wasn't letting go of. Max, don't touch that one, he's territorial. Lila's voice arrived from 30 feet ahead with the authority of a wildlife expert. How do you know? Max's voice delighted. Look at his claws, he's communicating. Diana's voice. Lila, are you fluent in crab? I'm developing a working knowledge. Ethan made a sound, a real laugh, the third unguarded one in an afternoon that had contained more of them than the previous several months combined. Sophie was laughing too beside him, that real laugh again, the one where she forgot to be careful. He thought, I don't want this afternoon to end. He thought, that's the most dangerous thing I've thought in 3 years. He thought it anyway. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. Buzzed again. He reached into his pocket because 3 buzzes in a row and glanced at the screen. Urgent, pre-transition, all hands. Monday 8 a.m. Mandatory attendance. Direct report to S. Caldwell. Please confirm receipt. Harmon Corp. HR. He confirmed receipt. He put the phone away. He looked at Sophie, who was watching the children, her face open and warm in the late afternoon light, and he thought about the name at the bottom of the email, and he thought about coincidences, and then he stopped thinking about it because Lila was calling his name, and the crabs were apparently communicating, and some things could wait until Monday. They always could, until they couldn't. The sun had dropped another hour's worth of sky by the time Diana announced that Max had officially exhausted his crab research quota for the day. Max disputed this loudly, with evidence pointing to 3 tide pools they hadn't yet investigated, and a stretch of rocks further down the shore that he described as definitely hiding something big. Lila backed him up with the loyalty of someone who has known a person for 2 hours and already considers them a cause worth defending. Diana was unmoved. Diana had the particular unmovability of a woman who had been out-negotiated by an 8-year-old before and had developed immunities. 20 minutes, Max said. We're leaving in 10, Diana said. 15. 10, and you get ice cream on the way home. Max performed a rapid internal calculation visible on his face in real time. Deal, he said, and immediately turned to Lila. We have 10 minutes. What's the priority? Rocks, Lila said, already moving. They watched the two children disappear toward the rocks with the focused urgency of people on a deadline, and Diana looked at Ethan and Sophie with the dry, affectionate exhaustion of a parent who has just successfully negotiated a foreign treaty. 8 years old, she said. He's 8 years old, and I'm over here doing shuttle diplomacy. She's 7, Ethan said, and she just established a bilateral agreement about crab research priorities with someone she met 40 minutes ago. Diana looked at him, looked at Sophie, back at him. There was something in her eyes that wasn't quite a question, but was adjacent to the look of a person who has been watching something develop between two other people and is deciding whether to acknowledge it. She decided not to, which told him she'd noticed. Sophie had noticed Diana notice. He could tell by the way she looked briefly at her coffee cup and then at the horizon with the careful neutrality of someone managing their expression. He filed that away too, in the collection that was getting harder to ignore. You two been friends long? Diana asked with a casualness that was doing a lot of heavy lifting. A beat. Exactly 1 beat too long. We met today, Ethan said. Diana looked between them again. Huh, she said. Just that. Huh. And then she looked at the rocks where the children had vanished, and she smiled at something private, and she didn't say another word about it. Sophie cleared her throat. How's the foundation holding up? She called toward the sandcastle, which was visible from where they stood, listing very slightly but structurally intact. She's changing the subject, Lila called back from the rocks without turning around. I wasn't... Sophie started. You were... Ethan said quietly. Sophie closed her mouth, opened it, looked at him with something that was half irritation and half something else entirely, and said nothing which was somehow more communicative than anything she might have said. Ethan took a sip of his coffee. It had gone cold. He drank it anyway. The 10 minutes became 12 before Diana physically intervened, and the goodbye between Lila and Max had the quality of two generals reluctantly concluding a summit formal warm with clear expectations about future communications. Max produced a slightly sandy business card from somewhere. It turned out to be his mother's, which he'd apparently been carrying without her knowledge for networking purposes. And Lila accepted it with great seriousness and said she didn't have a card, but that her dad's number was in her dad's phone, and Max could have it. Lila, Ethan started. In case of crab emergencies, Lila said with the innocent gravity of someone who has already thought this through. Diana looked at Ethan. Ethan looked at Diana. Some kind of parental agreement passed between them, the unspoken shorthand of two people who are both tired and both doing their best. He put Diana's number in his phone. Diana put his in hers. Max stood beside his mother, vibrating with barely contained satisfaction, and Lila stood beside Ethan with the serene expression of someone who has accomplished everything she came here to do. It was really good to meet you both, Diana said, and she meant it. He could tell she meant it the same way he could tell when people were performing social warmth versus actually feeling it. She looked at Sophie. You too. You too, Sophie said with the same quality of genuine. Diana picked up her bag, reached out and squeezed Sophie's arm, once brief, warm, unannounced. The kind of touch that passes between women who have recognized something in each other. Sophie looked slightly startled. Then something in her face softened in a way that changed it completely, and she put her free hand over Diana's for just a second, and then Diana and Max were walking away. Max's voice floating back to them, describing in great detail the specifications of what he intended to find at the next beach he visited. The sound of them faded. The crowd had thinned considerably the late afternoon, having chased most families back to parking lots and dinners and the next set of logistics. The beach felt bigger now, Quieter, the light doing the particular thing it did in the hour before sunset, turning everything amber and deliberate, like the day was deciding to be beautiful on its way out. Lila stood between the two adults, looking at the space where Diana and Max had been. Then she looked at the ocean. Then she reached up and put her hand into Ethan's, without looking at him. Which she did. Sometimes just reached for him, the way she'd been doing since she was old enough to reach the reflex of a child, who has learned that her father's hand is always there when she puts hers into the air. He held it. He always held it. "I like Max," Lila said. "He seems like good people," Ethan said. "He is. He listens." She considered. "Most boys don't listen. He listens." She looked at Sophie. "Did you have a Max when you were little, a friend who really listened?" Sophie's expression did something complicated. She sat down in her chair, and for a moment, she looked like something had pressed on her from the inside. "I had a friend named Rosie," she said. "From 4th grade. She was—" She stopped, smiled small and real. "She was relentless. She used to show up at my house on Saturday mornings at 8 a.m., just to see what I was doing. My mother loved her more than she loved me, I think." "What happened to her?" Lila asked. "We grew up," Sophie said. "Different cities, different directions." A pause. "I think about her sometimes. Whether she's still relentless." "She probably is," Lila said. "That kind of thing doesn't go away." Sophie looked at Lila for a long moment. "No," she said. "It probably doesn't." "You should find her," Lila said simply. "When things are hard, you need people who knew you when." The phrase landed in the air between the three of them with more weight than 7 words should carry. Ethan felt it. Sophie felt it. He could tell by the way her breath changed, just barely, just enough. "When things are hard," Sophie said quietly, "you need people who knew you when." She repeated it like she was filing it somewhere. "Did your mom say that?" "Yes," Lila said. She didn't add anything else. She looked at the water, and Ethan looked at the side of her face, the small certain profile of his daughter who carried Claire in her, like a song she'd been taught, and now sang without thinking about it, and the familiar ache moved through him, and he let it. He was getting better at letting it move through instead of blocking it. "She sounds like she was very wise," Sophie said. "She was," Lila said. "She was also really funny. People forget that wise people are usually funny." She looked at Sophie. "Are you funny?" Sophie blinked. I can be." "Daddy's funny when he stops worrying," Lila reported. "It takes a while to unlock." Ethan looked at the sky. "I'm right here." "I know," Lila said cheerfully. "That's why I'm telling her, so she knows what to expect." "What to?" He stopped. "Lila." "What?" He had no follow-up. Sophie was looking at the water with an expression he was increasingly able to read, the one where she was trying not to smile and losing. "Nothing," he said. "Never mind." Lila nodded satisfied and announced she was going to collect some shells for the record, and moved toward the water line with her bucket, leaving the two adults in a silence that had a different quality, now warmer and charged with something that hadn't been named. "She's campaigning for you," Sophie said. "I know," he said. "She's not subtle. She learned it from me. Apparently I'm only funny after a while to unlock." Sophie laughed. The real laugh. It was getting easier to draw out that laugh he'd noticed. The interval between careful and real was shortening. "For what it's worth," she said, "you've been pretty well unlocked this afternoon." "Beach effect," he said. "I can't hold all the systems together when there's this much salt air. You should come to the beach more often." "I should do a lot of things more often." He said it before he thought it through, and then it was out there, and there was a quality to the silence that followed that made him continue carefully, like crossing uncertain ground. "I've been running a very small loop, for a while. Work, Lila, sleep, repeat. I'm good at the loop. The loop is survivable." He paused. "But survivable isn't living," she said. "Yeah." She was quiet. He looked at her profile, the clean line of her jaw, the way she held herself upright and composed but differently than before, something having eased in it over the course of the afternoon. She was still precise, but the precision felt less armored. More just her. "I do the same thing," she said. "Different loop, same principle. Work, hotel room, next city, quarterly targets." A breath. "I've been in 4 different cities in the last 6 weeks. I don't have a plant even. I killed my last one in Dallas and I haven't replaced it because I'm never in one place long enough to—" She stopped. "That's a small thing to be sad about." "It's not," he said. She looked at him. "A plant is evidence of intention," he said. "It means you believe you'll be somewhere long enough to care for something." "That's not small." He paused. "What kind was it?" "A pothos. Supposedly unkillable." "Nothing's unkillable if you're never home." "No," she said softly. "Nothing is." They sat with that. The waves came in, and the light continued its amber decline, and Lila moved along the waterline collecting shells with the systematic focus of a scientist, and Ethan thought about plants and hotel rooms, and a woman who was starting a new position on Monday, in a city that might possibly be his city. And he thought about the name on his phone, and he almost said something, and then he didn't. Then Lila screamed. Not fear, not pain. The other kind, the electric delighted shriek of a child who has found something extraordinary. Both adults were on their feet and moving before the sound finished the way parents move on instinct and adrenaline, not conscious thought. Lila was standing at the waterline with her bucket pressed to her chest and her eyes at maximum diameter. "Look," she said, barely containing herself. "Look what I found." In the bucket, a sand dollar. Whole. Unbroken. Nearly perfect, the pale etched surface clean and intact, the kind you searched for your whole childhood and almost never found. Both adults stopped. The urgency drained out of the movement and became something else. "Lila," Ethan said. "I know," she whispered. "I know. Don't touch it." "I'm not touching it." She looked at Sophie with enormous eyes. "Have you ever found a whole one?" Sophie crouched down to Lila's level, looked at the sand dollar. Her face in that moment was completely open. No management, no precision, just a person looking at something delicate and whole, and nearly miraculous. "Once," she said. "I was 9. I carried it all the way home in my lap in the car, and then I put it on my windowsill, and it was there for years." She looked at Lila. "What are you going to do with it?" Lila thought about it with great seriousness. "I think," she said slowly, "I'm going to give it to someone." She looked at the sand dollar, then at Sophie, then back at the sand dollar. "Someone who needs to know that perfect things still exist." The air between the 3 of them went very still. Sophie made a sound, barely a sound, more a breath, the kind that happens when something hits somewhere undefended. Her hand came up and touched her own collarbone, just briefly. Just for a second, the gesture of someone who has been reached without expecting it. "That's—" she started. "Here," Lila said, and held the bucket out to Sophie. Sophie looked at the bucket, looked at Lila. "Lila, I can't take." "You need it more than I do," Lila said, with the matter-of-fact certainty of a child who has made an assessment and is committed to it. "Daddy and I find things. We have a whole collection at home, shells and sea glass, and a really good rock that looks like a heart." She pushed the bucket gently forward. "You should have this one." Sophie looked at Ethan. He didn't say anything. He wasn't capable of saying anything at that particular moment. He just made a small gesture go ahead and looked at his daughter with the overwhelming love of a parent, watching their child be exactly the best version of themselves. Sophie reached into the bucket. Lifted the sand dollar with both hands the same way you'd hold something you didn't want to break. She looked at it for a long moment with an expression he was going to remember for a very long time. "Thank you, Lila," she said. Her voice was steady. Her eyes were not entirely dry. "Don't put it anywhere dark," Lila advised. "It should be where you can see it, so you remember." "I'll remember," Sophie said. Ethan looked away. He looked at the ocean, which was doing what it always did, arriving and retreating, patient and massive and entirely unconcerned with the small, devastating moments happening on its edge. His throat was doing something complicated. He gave it a moment. When he looked back, Sophie had stood up. She was holding the sand dollar carefully in her palm and looking at Lila with an expression that had nothing managed in it, just open human real. "Your mom taught you to give things away?" Sophie asked. "She taught me to notice when someone needed something," Lila said. "The giving part is easy once you notice." Sophie closed her hand gently around the sand dollar. Then she looked at Ethan, and the look lasted a second longer than looks usually lasted, and it carried something in it that hadn't been there at the beginning of the afternoon. Something past the composure and the precision and the armor. Something that was just her, looking at just him. He felt it land. He didn't pretend he didn't. "I should—" Sophie started and then stopped. "The sun's going," Ethan said. Not pushing, just noting. "Yeah." She looked at the horizon. The sky was doing extravagant things the way it did in that last 40 minutes. Broad strokes of orange and copper, and a deep bruised rose at the edges. She stood in it, and he stood in it, and Lila stood in it, eating a cracker she'd materialized from somewhere, and none of them moved toward leaving. His phone buzzed. He looked at it automatically because 3 years of habit. The screen read, "Harmon Corp Monday briefing location update, main conference room 7th floor. S. Caldwell will conduct all staff at 8 a.m. sharp." He stared at the message for 2 full seconds. The 7th floor. He knew that floor. He'd walked through that conference room 100 times. He looked at Sophie. She was watching the sunset, the sand dollar held carefully in her palm, the fading light on her face. She looked different than she'd looked this morning, he imagined. Lighter somehow. Less like someone carrying something alone. He looked at his phone. At the name. S. Caldwell. Sophie. Sophie Caldwell. The thing that had been hovering at the edge of his consciousness all afternoon. The persistent buzz of coincidence. The name that kept appearing arrived with sudden, awful, complete clarity. His new boss was standing 15 feet away, holding a sand dollar his daughter had given her. His new boss had been the woman in the towel. He had walked into her bathroom. He had sat next to her all afternoon. He had told her about Claire, about the architecture program, about survivable not being living. She had told him about her father, about Dallas, about the plant she'd killed. They had been in the slow and specific way of an unexpected afternoon, becoming something he didn't have a name for it, but it was becoming, it was real, it was happening. And Monday morning he was going to walk into that conference room, and she was going to be standing at the head of the table. He put his phone in his pocket. His hands were steady. He had spent 3 years developing the ability to keep his hands steady when everything inside them was not. "Cold?" he asked. His voice was even. He was proud of his voice. She looked at him. Something moved in her face, the flicker again, the one he still couldn't entirely read. "Getting there," she said. "The wind's picking up." "Do you want—" He stopped. What was he offering? His jacket. He hadn't brought one. His plan. He didn't have one. The truth, he needed 48 hours with that before he knew what to do with it. "There's still coffee," he said. "If it's not completely dead." She looked at the thermos. "I'll chance it." He poured. She took the cup. They stood in the extravagant sunset and said nothing, and Lila hummed something soft to herself at the waterline, and Ethan held the knowledge in his chest. The name, the coincidence, the impossible geometry of this afternoon, and thought not yet. Not here. Not in this light. Not in this moment. Not while she was holding a sand dollar his daughter had given her, and looking like someone who had set something down for an afternoon and didn't quite want to pick it up again. He was going to have to tell her. Or she was going to figure it out, and from everything he'd seen of Sophie Caldwell, she was going to figure it out faster than most people figured out anything. But right now the sun was finishing its extravagance, and Lila was humming, and Sophie was drinking cold coffee from a paper cup without complaining, and Ethan Harper, for the first time in 3 years, was somewhere, completely, physically, undeniably present. "Tell me something," he said. She looked at him. "What do you do," he said, "when the thing you weren't planning for turns out to be the thing you needed?" She was quiet for a moment. The wind moved her hair. She looked at the cup in her hands. "I don't know yet," she said. "I'm still figuring that out." "Me too," he said. They stood there together in the last of the light, not knowing what Monday was about to do to them. The drive home was quiet, in the way that full things are quiet. Lila fell asleep 12 minutes after they left the parking lot, which was a record even for her. One moment she was narrating a detailed theory about whether crabs communicated through claw angles, and the next her head was against the window, and her breathing had gone slow and even, and Gerald was wedged under her arm, like he'd always been there, which he had. Ethan drove with one hand on the wheel and the other resting on the center console and the radio off, because he needed to think, and music made thinking harder. He thought about the name on his phone. He thought about how many times it had buzzed throughout the afternoon, and how many times he'd put it face down, and how the universe had apparently decided that wasn't enough of a hint, and had arranged for the name attached to those messages to be sitting 15 feet away in a folding chair, drinking his coffee and holding a sand dollar his daughter had given her. He thought about her face when Lila handed her the sand dollar. The way her hand had come up to her collarbone. The way her eyes had gone briefly, privately, unguardedly wet. He thought about what she'd said, "I don't know yet. I'm still figuring that out." He thought about Monday morning, 8 a.m. Conference room, 7th floor. S. Caldwell, incoming regional director, conducting all staff. He ran the numbers without meaning to. The invisible math doing what it always did, running calculations in the background, regardless of what he told it to do. Options tell her tonight before Monday. He had her know. He didn't have her number. He hadn't asked. He'd been so careful about not making the afternoon into something she hadn't signed up for that he hadn't asked for her number, which meant that right now Sophie Caldwell was somewhere a hotel, probably given what she'd said about 4 cities in 6 weeks, and he had no way to reach her before 8 a.m. Monday. Option 2, say nothing. Walk into that conference room. Let the moment arrive. He thought about her face when she saw him. He thought about what she'd told him, the real things, the medicine she'd wanted to study, the plant she'd killed in Dallas, the armor she'd built after her father died. Things you tell someone when you think you're just meeting a person, not a complication. He didn't sleep well that night. This was not unusual. What was unusual was the quality of the sleeplessness, not the familiar grinding anxiety, the invisible math running disaster scenarios. Something else. Unresolved. Like a sentence that had been interrupted mid-word. He was up at 5. He stood in Lila's doorway. Gerald. Dark curls. Total surrender to sleep. He exhaled. "You're the reason. You're the whole reason." Then he went and made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table and looked at the sand dollar on the windowsill. Lila had insisted on displaying their beach collection when they got home, lining up shells and sea glass, and the heart-shaped rock with the focused curation of a museum director, and thought about a woman he'd known for one afternoon holding its twin and trying not to cry. He got to the office at 7:43, earlier than usual. He told himself this was because he wanted coffee from the good machine on the 3rd floor before the meeting. This was partially true. The other part was that he wanted to be seated and settled and professionally composed before anyone else arrived, which was the behavior of a man who was managing his variables. The conference room on the 7th floor had a long table, 12 chairs, a whiteboard, and a window that looked out on the city at an angle that caught the morning light well. He knew the room. He'd sat in it for budget reviews and quarterly assessments and the occasional restructuring announcement, which was its own particular flavor of dread. He chose a seat 3 chairs from the head of the table, close enough to be engaged, far enough not to be in the direct line of fire if something was being cut. 3 years of experience in that room had taught him the geometry of survival. His colleagues arrived in 2s and 3s. Marcus from Regional Logistics, who always brought a breakfast sandwich and ate it with the guilty speed of someone who knew he shouldn't be eating in meetings, but couldn't help himself. Priya from Finance, who sat down, opened her laptop, and immediately began doing the thing she always did, scanning everything in the room with quick, precise eyes, assessing. James from operations, who was 26 and knew enough that he still wrote things down in an actual notebook, which Ethan found both endearing and faintly nostalgic. Nobody knew what this meeting was about beyond the transition. Nobody said they were nervous. Everyone was nervous. Ethan could read it in the specific way people held their coffee cups and arranged their phones on the table in front of them, face up, because bad news arrives faster if you can see it coming. 7:58. The door opened. He knew before he looked up. He knew the way you know sometimes a shift in the room's atmosphere, a change in the quality of attention around him. He heard Marcus go slightly still mid-sandwich bite. He heard Priya's typing pause. He looked up. Sophie Caldwell walked into the conference room in a charcoal blazer and dark trousers, a leather portfolio under one arm, her hair pulled back with the clean precision of someone who meant business. The sand dollar was not visible. The open amber-lit woman from the beach was not visible. What was visible was someone who had put their armor back on carefully, completely, with the practiced efficiency of long habit. She was scanning the room as she walked to the head of the table. The way she'd told him she scanned rooms from the edges, taking inventory. Her eyes reached him on the 3rd second. He saw the exact moment she registered his face. A blink. Just one blink, a fraction slower than normal, the only visible evidence of what was happening behind her eyes. And then her gaze moved on, continued its sweep, completed its circuit of the room, and she set her portfolio on the table with the easy authority of someone who has run enough rooms that entering one is automatic. "Good morning," she said. Her voice was level, professional, entirely composed. "I'm Sophie Caldwell. For those I haven't connected with yet, which is most of you, I'm the incoming regional director for this division. I appreciate you making time on a Monday morning. I know Monday mornings are nobody's favorite thing." A brief, functional pause. "Let me tell you what I'm here to do, and then I want to hear from you." Priya was already typing. Marcus had put down his sandwich. James was writing in his notebook. Everyone was doing the thing people do when someone competent and clearly authoritative walks into a room and starts talking. They oriented toward her the way you orient toward something that knows where it's going. Ethan watched her. She did not look at him again. She looked at the room, all of it, everyone in it, with the careful equity of someone who understood that how you distributed your attention in the first 5 minutes of a meeting told people everything about how you intended to lead. She was good. She was very, very good. He felt something that was partly admiration and partly the specific vertigo of watching a person you know from one context exist in a completely different one. Like seeing your doctor at a grocery store. The same person. Different frame, your brain insisting on reconciling two images that don't fully overlap. The woman who had stood in a tide pool watching a crab with her face completely open. The woman who was now standing at the head of a conference table, controlled and precise, telling 12 people about strategic realignment, with the quiet authority of someone who had been doing this long enough that the authority was no longer performed. Both true. Both her. The armor and the person underneath it. She was talking about the division's performance metrics. She was asking questions pointed specific, not the generic getting-to-know-you questions of a new executive performing interest, but actual questions, the kind that revealed she'd already read everything she already knew, the numbers she was asking, to see how people thought, not what they knew. Marcus answered something about logistics throughput. Priya walked her through the Q2 variants. James said something earnest about process optimization that revealed both his youth and the fact that he was smarter than his age, suggested. Sophie listened with that quality of attention he'd seen on the beach, the real kind, the receiving kind, not the processing kind. She asked follow-ups. She remembered what people said and referenced it 3 exchanges later. She did not perform interest. She was interested. He had not yet said a word. He was 3 chairs from the head of the table, hands flat on the surface in front of him, maintaining the expression of a man who is professionally engaged and not in the middle of a situation of his own making. Then she looked at him. "Ethan Harper," she said. Not a question. She knew his name. Of course she knew his name. It was on the seating roster. It was in the files she'd clearly read. She was the kind of person who read the files. "Regional operations. 8 years. "That's right," he said. His voice was even. He was proud of his voice. "I've read your efficiency reports from the last 3 quarters," she said. "Impressive throughput management, consistent." A pause exactly calibrated. "You're also the person who flagged the distribution bottleneck in the northern region last November. That assessment saved the company approximately 8 months of compounding inefficiency." She held his gaze for exactly 1 beat longer than she'd held anyone else's. "Good catch." "Thank you," he said. She moved on. Back to the room. Back to the meeting. Priya asked something about headcount. Marcus asked something about the merger timeline. Sophie answered both with the precise economical clarity of someone who didn't waste words. Ethan breathed. She hadn't acknowledged it. She wasn't going to acknowledge it, not here, not in front of 11 other people, not in the first meeting on the first day. He understood this. He even respected it. It was the right call professionally. It was exactly what he would have done. It also meant that until this meeting ended, he was going to sit 3 chairs from a woman who had told him about her father and the plant she'd killed, and the medicine she'd wanted to study, and the armor she wore over all of it, and pretend they had met this morning for the first time. He was good at pretending things were fine. 3 years of practice. He managed it for 47 minutes. The meeting ended with action items and a follow-up schedule, and the general sense that things were going to change, and the separate, quieter sense that they were going to change under someone who actually knew what she was doing. People filed out. Marcus retrieved his sandwich. Priya had already sent 2 emails. James had 3 full pages of notes. Ethan stayed in his seat. He didn't engineer it exactly. He didn't not engineer it. He gathered his things at a speed that was perhaps slightly more deliberate than necessary, and when he looked up, the room had emptied, and Sophie was closing her portfolio, and they were alone. She looked at him. He looked at her. "You knew," she said. Not an accusation. A statement quiet and clean. "I figured it out yesterday," he said. "Late. The email came through with your name. And you didn't say anything." "No." She looked at the table. Her hands were flat on the portfolio cover. "I figured it out this morning. HR sent a staff roster with photos." A pause. "Yours was very professional." "It's 3 years old. I look less tired in it." "You look..." She stopped, made a decision he could almost see. "You were going to walk in here and let it happen." "I didn't have your number," he said. "I didn't ask. I should have asked. I didn't offer." A beat. "I should have offered." The morning light was doing its thing with the window. Neither of them moved. "This is complicated," Sophie said. "Yes. I'm your director, as of today, effective immediately." She said it the way she said difficult, true things directly without cushioning. "That's not nothing." "No," he agreed. "It's not nothing. Not what happened yesterday." She stopped, pressed her lips together. "What happened yesterday was real. I want to be clear about that. I'm not..." She looked at him. "I'm not the kind of person who pretends things didn't happen." "Neither am I," he said. "But I am the kind of person who takes her responsibilities seriously," she said. "All of them." A breath. "I don't mix things. I don't blur lines. I've seen what happens when people in leadership blur lines, and it's bad for everyone, and I won't do it." "I know," he said. "I'm not asking you to." "Then what are you..." She stopped. "I'm not asking you for anything," he said, and meant it. And also, underneath that did not entirely mean it, which was a contradiction he was going to sit with quietly for as long as necessary. "I'm telling you that I know this is complicated, and that I think you're going to be very good at this job, and that yesterday was..." He stopped, looked for the word. "It was the best afternoon I've had in 3 years, and I'm not going to pretend it wasn't even if we never mention it again." Sophie looked at him for a long moment. The armor was on. He could see it. He could also see because he'd spent a whole afternoon watching her face the exact places where it didn't quite close all the way. "You should know," she said quietly, "that I don't usually..." She stopped. Started again. I don't usually talk to people the way I talked to you yesterday. I know, he said. The things I told you. Stay with me, he said. I'm not using them. She exhaled. One slow breath, like something releasing. I know that, she said. I know. She looked at her portfolio, at the window, back at him. This is going to require professionalism, he said. Yes. Clear boundaries. Yes. Complete separation of whatever yesterday was from whatever this is. Yes. A pause. Can you do that? He thought about it. Honestly, actually thought about it, which was more than she'd asked for, but was the only honest answer available. I can do my job, he said. I'm very good at my job. You already know that you read my files. He held her gaze. Whether I can pretend yesterday didn't happen is a different question, and I'd rather not lie to you about that. Something shifted in her face. The armor didn't come down, but something behind it moved. Fair, she said. Fair, he said. She picked up her portfolio. I have 4 more meetings today. I have a distribution report due by 3. Then we both have places to be. We do. She moved toward the door. At the threshold she stopped, and he thought she was going to say something professional and correct, and he was going to say something professional and correct, and they were both going to walk into the rest of their Monday, and that was going to be how it went. She turned around. The sand dollar, she said. He waited. I put it on the windowsill, she said, of the hotel room. A pause that contained everything she wasn't saying. First thing I unpacked. Then she was gone, and he was alone in the conference room with the morning light doing its thing, and his hands were flat on the table, and his heart was running at a speed he recognized from other moments of recklessness and sudden, certain knowing. He picked up his phone. He looked at his contacts. He looked at Diana's number, which he did have because Lila had insisted because of crab emergencies, and he looked at the empty space where Sophie's should be, and he made a decision. He texted Diana. Simple. Direct. This is Ethan from the beach, Lila's dad. Question: did you happen to exchange numbers with Sophie yesterday? The 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Then, I did. I also knew this was coming. Give me a second. He stared at his phone. Then it buzzed. A new contact. Sophie Caldwell. Diana had added a note below the number. She's good people, Ethan. Don't be an idiot. He sat with the contact in his hand for 40 seconds, which was how long it took him to stop doing the invisible math and accept that some things you just did, consequences arriving later, living happening now. He typed, This is Ethan Harper, your employee, who you apparently already knew from reading a staff roster this morning. A pause. Then, Lila wants you to know the crab situation is still being monitored. He put the phone in his pocket. He stood up. He had a distribution report due by 3 and 4 floors of professional composure to maintain, and 11 colleagues who could not know any of what he was currently carrying. His phone buzzed. He didn't take it out immediately. He waited until he was in the elevator alone descending, and then he looked. Her message read, Tell Lila the crab situation is in good hands. A pause. Then a second message arriving 3 seconds after the first. Also, I'm glad you found Diana's number. I was trying to figure out how to give you mine without it being... A pause. Then, professional. He read it twice. He put the phone in his pocket. He stepped off the elevator into the 3rd floor hallway, past Marcus eating the rest of his sandwich against the wall, past Priya walking fast in the direction of her office, past James, who looked up from his notebook and said, Good meeting, right? She seems really sharp. With the earnest enthusiasm of someone who hadn't yet learned to read subtext. She's very sharp, Ethan said. Kind of intense, though, James said. Yeah, Ethan said and kept walking. You'll get used to it. He sat down at his desk. He opened his distribution report. He looked at the numbers, which were his language, which he was excellent at, which had never once failed to give him something to do with his hands when everything else was complicated. He worked for 40 minutes with the focused, clean efficiency of a man who has decided to be exactly where he is and do exactly what he's doing. Then his phone buzzed again. Sophie. One more thing. A pause, longer this time, long enough that he looked up from his screen and waited. Then, I want to be clear that what I said this morning about boundaries and professionalism, I meant it. I mean it. Another pause. I also want to be clear that I'm aware it doesn't resolve everything. And I think... The message cut off. Then a new one. I think you deserve someone who's honest with you about that. He read it 3 times. He set the phone down. He looked at his report. He looked at the window. He looked at his hands. Then he picked the phone up and typed, I think you deserve someone who's honest with you too. A breath. So, honestly, I don't know what this is, but I'm not interested in pretending I don't want to find out. He paused, then added, Professionally, my distribution report will be excellent. Personally, I'm a work in progress. A beat. Lila would say that's enough. He sent it. He went back to his report. 3 floors up in an office she'd occupied for exactly 4 hours, Sophie. Caldwell read the message. She read it twice. She set her phone face down on the desk and looked at her portfolio and thought about pothos plants and sand dollars and a 7-year-old who said the giving part was easy once you noticed. Then she picked her phone up and typed one word. Agreed. And somewhere between the 7th floor and the 3rd, in the ordinary Monday morning machinery of a building full of people doing their jobs, something that had started in a women's restroom with the wrong door and a white towel, and 2 people frozen in mutual shock, continued quietly into the next thing it was going to be. Neither of them knew exactly what that was. Both of them, for the first time in a long time, thought that not knowing might be something they could live with. The week moved the way weeks move when you're holding something carefully slowly, in some places too fast in others. The hours uneven and strange. Ethan did his job. He did it well, the way he always did it, because excellence was the one thing that had never required him to feel anything in particular. His distribution report landed in Sophie's inbox at 2:57 on Monday afternoon. She sent back a single line at 3:40. Clean work. Thank you. Professional. Correct. Carrying nothing extra. He understood. He accepted it. He went home, made Lila dinner pasta, because Tuesday was pasta, the schedule holding the week upright the way it always did, and sat across from his daughter while she told him about a boy in her class named Derek, who had claimed that crabs didn't have feelings, and how she had responded to this with what she described as calm, evidence-based disagreement, and how her teacher had suggested they take the debate outside the classroom. Were you loud? Ethan asked. I was passionate, Lila said. How is that different? Loud is about volume. Passionate is about conviction. She twirled pasta around her fork with great authority. Derek was wrong. Someone had to say something. Someone didn't have to say it in the middle of math. The truth doesn't have a schedule, Daddy. He looked at his daughter. He thought about a woman 3 floors up from his desk, who had said very quietly over cold coffee in a paper cup, I'm still figuring that out. He thought about the word agreed, arriving on his screen, simple and clean and everything. No, he said. It really doesn't. They texted. Not constantly. Not the breathless, compulsive exchange of 2 people in the first rush of something, which would have been easier to name and therefore easier to be afraid of. It was more careful than that, more deliberate. She would send something at odd hours, 9:43 p.m., 6:20 a.m., short, precise in the voice that was hers, and not the professional one. He would respond. It felt like 2 people learning a new language, slowly choosing each word. Thursday she sent, Lila was right about the crab. I looked it up. They have a central nervous system capable of nociception. Derek is wrong. He stared at his phone for a moment. Then, do you want me to tell her, or do you want the credit? 3 minutes. Then tell her. She'll appreciate the confirmation more than I need the credit. He told Lila at breakfast Friday morning. Lila set down her spoon, looked at him with enormous eyes and said, I knew it, with a volume that probably woke the neighbors. Then, did Sophie find that out? She did. I like her, Lila said, which she had already said multiple times, but this time it came with something additional, a weight, a consideration. The look of a child who is feeling her way towards something she doesn't have complete language for yet. Daddy? Yeah. Is she going to be around more? He looked at his daughter. The amber eyes, the dark curls, the 7-year-old face that had Claire's directness in it, and none of her evasiveness, which meant she had come to him for that particular quality, and he was trying very hard not to let her down. I don't know yet, he said. We're figuring it out. Figuring what out? Whether it makes sense. Whether it's the right thing at the right time in the right way. Lila picked her spoon back up, regarded her bowl. Mom used to say that people spend so much time figuring out if something is the right time that they miss it. He felt the sentence land in his chest like a stone into water, the ring spreading outward. She said a lot of things like that. She was right about most of them. A pause. Was she right about that one? He looked at his daughter, who was 7 years old, and had just handed him something true without packaging it, without apology, with the clean directness of a person who loved him and therefore told him what she actually thought. Yeah, he said. I think she probably was. Lila nodded, finished her breakfast, put her bowl in the sink with the careful precision of a child who has been taught to clean up after herself, and then she turned around and said with great finality, Then figure it out faster, Daddy. Life doesn't wait. She picked up her backpack and walked to the door. He stared at the space she'd occupied. Life doesn't wait. He picked up his phone. He looked at Sophie's contact. Diana's note still there underneath. She's good people. Ethan, don't be an idiot. He typed, Are you free Saturday? He put the phone down. He picked it up again. He added, Not as your employee, as the person who walked through the wrong door. He put it down. He went to work. The response came at 10:17 between his second coffee and a logistics call with the Northern Distribution team. He looked at his screen under the table during a pause in the call and read, Saturday works. Lila too, I hope. I have news about Derek's crab position, and I want to deliver it in person. He looked at the message. He looked at the ceiling. He thought about a sand dollar on a hotel windowsill. He typed one word under the table while Marcus explained something about throughput on the other end of the phone. Yes. Saturday arrived with the particular energy of a day that has been anticipated, not the anxious anticipation of dread, but the other kind, the forward-leaning kind, the kind Ethan had almost forgotten the flavor of. He was up at 5:12. He stood in Lila's doorway. Gerald, dark curls, the small, complete piece of a sleeping child. He exhaled. He said the thing he always said, directed at his daughter like a compass point. Then he went and made the good coffee. Lila was dressed and ready by 7:30, which was unprecedented. She was wearing the mermaid swimsuit under her clothes again. Efficiency, she explained when he raised an eyebrow, and she had packed her own bag. This time the contents of which she declined to disclose, but which clinked slightly in a way that suggested rocks. You packed rocks, he said. I packed specimens, she said. There's a difference. For what? Sophie might want to see them. She's scientifically oriented. A beat. I did research. He stared at his daughter. You researched Sophie. I asked Diana. Diana said she was very smart and that she used to want to be a doctor for kids. Lila shouldered her bag. I think that means she likes evidence, hence the specimens. Hence, he said. You know what hence means? I looked it up, Lila said, already walking to the door. Are we going? They met Sophie at a coffee place near the waterfront neutral ground, which had been her suggestion, which he'd understood and appreciated the care she was taking with the geometry of this. She was there when they arrived, sitting at a corner table with a cup of coffee and her phone face down, and her jacket over the back of the chair. And when Lila came through the door and walked directly to her with her bag of specimens, and zero hesitation, something happened to Sophie's face that he was going to keep for a long time. I brought evidence, Lila announced, climbing into the chair across from Sophie and beginning to unzip her bag with focused purpose. About crab nociception. I've been collecting supporting materials. Sophie looked at Lila over the table with the full, genuine attention that was one of the things he'd noticed first about her. "Show me," she said. Lila produced in order a printout of a marine biology abstract that Ethan had helped her find. Thursday night 3 shells, arranged in what she explained, was a sensory receptor diagram formation. A photograph she'd drawn herself of a crab with arrows indicating where the nociceptors were located, and a small rock that had nothing to do with crabs, but that she wanted Sophie to see anyway, because it had a stripe of quartz in it that caught the light exactly right. Sophie looked at all of it. She asked 2 actual questions about the abstract. She held the rock up to the window. Lila watched her with the transparent, unashamed delight of a child being taken seriously by someone she has decided to admire. "Your diagram is very accurate," Sophie said, setting the crab drawing down carefully. "I looked at 6 different pictures," Lila said. "It shows." She looked at Ethan across the table. Something in her eyes warm, a little rueful, the look of someone who had built walls and was noticing they'd come down again without her authorization. "You've got a scientist on your hands." "Among other things," he said. "I'm also a structural engineer," Lila said, "and a crab linguist. I'm developing a working knowledge." "Crab linguist is a legitimate career path," Sophie said seriously. "That's what I said," Lila told Ethan. "You literally never said that," he said. "I implied it." Sophie was smiling, the real one, the unguarded one, the one he'd been learning to draw out over the past week in text messages sent at odd hours. She looked at Lila, and she looked at him, and the smile held, and he held it back, and Lila looked between them with the knowing satisfaction of someone whose plan is unfolding correctly. "I'm going to look at the boats," Lila announced, standing up with her bag. "That one right there." She pointed at the window toward the waterfront where boats were visible. "I can see it from here, so you can see me, and I can see you. 5 minutes." 10, Ethan said. "Good," Lila said, as if she'd gotten what she wanted, which she had. She walked to the window. She sat on the ledge facing out, but her reflection was visible in the glass, and he could see her watching them with the peripheral practiced subtlety of someone who had been observing adults her whole life and was very good at it now. He looked at Sophie. She looked at him. The table between them was small. The coffee was good. The morning light was the particular clear light of a day that intended to be generous. "She planned this," Sophie said. "She absolutely planned this." The specimens were cover. "She packed them Thursday." Sophie laughed, low, real warm. Then she looked at her cup and was quiet for a moment, the thoughtful quiet he'd learned to read as preparation, rather than retreat. "Ethan. Yeah, I want to say something, and I want to say it clearly, because I think clearly is how we have to do things if we're going to do them at all." "Okay," he said. She looked at him. "I've been thinking about what you said Monday, that you're not interested in pretending you don't want to find out what this is." She paused. "I've been thinking about that a lot, actually. More than is strictly professional. More than is strictly professional, he said, has been my condition since approximately 2:45 p.m. on Saturday." Something moved through her expression, fast and real there, and gone. "The thing is," she said, "I've spent a very long time being the most competent person in the room, and I'm good at it. I'm not performing when I say I'm good at it. I know how to lead. I know how to deliver results. I know how to walk into a room that doesn't want me there and make it work anyway." She held his gaze. "What I'm not good at is this." "This," he said. "Uncertainty. Wanting something I don't have a plan for. Trusting—" She stopped. "Trusting that if I step toward something without knowing how it ends, I won't lose my footing completely." "Sophie," he said, "let me finish. Not sharp, just steady. I'm saying this because I don't want to do it wrong. I've done things wrong before by being too careful, and I've done things wrong by not being careful enough, and I don't know which one applies here, and that scares me." He let her finish. He let the words be out in the air. Then he said, "Can I say something?" "Yes." "You walked into a conference room full of people who were afraid of what you represented," he said, "and you made them feel heard before you asked anything of them." You do that, I've watched you do it all week. You walk toward things scared and do them well anyway. He paused. You're already doing the hard thing. You've been doing it. She looked at him for a moment. Then, you watched me all week. You're my director. It's professional. Ethan. I watched you all week, he said. Completely unprofessionally. I'm aware. She made the sound that breath laugh, the one she did when something hit her sideways. Her hands moved on the table. Not toward him, not away from him. Just moved, adjusting the gesture of someone recalibrating. There's the director issue, she said. Yeah. That's real. It is. It's not. I'm not using it as an excuse. I'm saying it's a real thing that requires a real conversation with HR and possibly a structural solution if... She stopped. If this becomes something that requires a structural solution. A structural solution, he said. Like a transfer of reporting lines. Possibly. You've already thought about this. A pause. I thought about it Sunday, she said. Before the Monday meeting, I drafted a structural proposal for a reporting line adjustment that would remove the direct supervisory relationship. She looked at her cup. I didn't file it because I thought I was being premature. He stared at her. You drafted a proposal. I'm a planner, she said. You know this about me. You drafted a proposal, he said again, before you'd seen me in the building, in case this turned out to be something that needed a structural solution. It's called risk management, she said, and the dry composure was there, but so was the color in her face, and he thought she drafted a proposal, before Monday. She walked in there already having planned for the possibility that this was real. File it, he said. She looked at him. Ethan, file the proposal. Get the structural solution in place. And then, he held her gaze. And then, let's find out what this is. The silence lasted exactly long enough to mean something. Outside, visible through the window, Lila was sitting on the ledge with her nose an inch from the glass, watching boats with enormous focus and absolutely no pretense of not also watching them in the reflection. She's not subtle, Sophie said. I know. She gets it from you. I've been told. Sophie looked at her coffee, at her hands, at him. You should know, she said quietly, that I haven't unpacked more than a suitcase in 3 years. I don't have a plant. I haven't let myself be anywhere long enough to need one. She paused. I'm telling you that because it's true, and you deserve to know the whole picture, not just the Saturday version of me. I know, he said. I also know that you put the sand dollar on the windowsill first thing, before you unpacked anything else. She went very still. You told me, he said gently. Monday morning, before you left the conference room. She had forgotten she'd told him. He could see that the small surprise of it, the recognition. Something shifted in her face. The armor, which had been sitting lighter all morning, moved another inch. I did, she said. I did tell you that. The sand dollar isn't unpacking, he said. It's just putting something somewhere because it matters. Because you wanted to see it. He paused. That's enough. That counts. She looked at him with gray eyes that were not cold at all, had never been cold, were in fact the specific depth of something that had been still for a long time and was beginning carefully to move again. You know what Lila told me? She said. When she gave it to me. What? She said, don't put it anywhere dark. Put it where you can see it so you remember. A breath. I think about that. Every morning when I see it. Remember what exactly? I've been asking myself that all week. What's the answer? He said. That perfect things still exist, she said. That's what she said. Someone who needs to know that perfect things still exist. She looked at him. I think she knew exactly what she was doing. He looked at Lila, who was now pretending to examine a boat with extreme concentration, and had her chin lifted in a way that meant she knew she was being discussed and was being dignified about it. She usually does, he said. That's the thing about her. She doesn't stumble into wisdom, she just has it. carries it around like it's normal. She got it from two remarkable people, Sophie said. The sentence arrived simply and stayed. He felt it move through him the way real things moved through him, without announcement, without performance, just present. "Thank you," he said. He meant more than the sentence. Sophie reached across the table. She didn't take his hand. She put hers next to his, close, warm, intentional, and left it there, a question rather than a declaration, a step toward something rather than the arrival. He turned his hand over. She let their fingers settle together loose and unhurried, the way you hold something you're not afraid of losing because you're paying attention this time. Lila's reflection in the window did a thing that was not subtle at all. She pressed both hands to her face and then immediately went back to examining the boats with exaggerated focus. "She saw that," Sophie said. "She did," he said. "Is she okay with it?" He looked at his daughter, at the small smile she was trying to contain and failing to contain, at the way she was sitting up a little straighter, like someone whose plan has arrived at exactly the right outcome. "She's already taking credit for it," he said. Sophie laughed. The full, unguarded laugh, the one she'd started doing on the beach and hadn't stopped doing since, the one that meant she'd stopped checking whether it was okay first. He felt it against his hand, where their fingers were resting together, and thought this. This is the thing. This ordinary, extraordinary, uncalculated moment. They stayed for another hour. Lila came back to the table and showed Sophie the quartz-striped rock in proper lighting and explained her theory about crab communication through claw angles, and Sophie listened and asked questions that revealed she had actually looked things up, had genuinely engaged with the subject, because that was who she was. She didn't perform interest. She was interested. Lila noticed. Of course Lila noticed. She had her mother's eyes for people, and she had apparently decided somewhere around Thursday that Sophie Caldwell was the real thing, and once Lila made that assessment, she was done reconsidering. On the way out, Lila walked between them and took both their hands simultaneously, with the decisive confidence of someone establishing a new configuration of the world, and neither adult said anything, and they walked to the waterfront, like that, the three of them, in the clear morning light. The week after Sophie filed the reporting line proposal, HR processed it in 3 days. Ethan's direct supervision moved to Marcus's team lead, clean and professional, and exactly the structural solution she'd drafted before she'd seen him in the building. She sent him one message when it was done. Filed. Processed. Done. He sent back, "Thank you for planning ahead." She sent, "Don't make it a habit of using my planning against me." He sent, "Too late." 3 dots. Then, "I know." The month that followed was not simple. It was not a movie. It was not a perfect arc. It was 2 people with real histories and real complications, and a professional relationship that required genuine care, navigating something neither of them had planned for or was entirely prepared for. There were moments when the armor went back up, hers first, his in response, both of them retreating to the safety of professional distance when something got too close too fast. There were moments when Ethan did the invisible math and got lost in it. There were moments when Sophie's control closed over her like a hand closing into a fist, and he had to wait quietly at the edge of it, trusting what he'd seen on the beach. But there was also this every Saturday, and most Sundays, and occasionally a Thursday evening when logistics aligned. There was Lila, who treated Sophie's increasing presence in their lives with the calm satisfaction of someone whose hypothesis has been confirmed by the evidence. There was Diana, who texted Ethan periodically with updates on Max's crab research progress and occasional unprompted opinions on what he should do next, which were always correct and slightly irritating. There was the sand dollar on Sophie's windowsill, which she moved exactly once from the hotel room to the apartment. She took in the city in the 3rd week of her position, the first apartment she'd had in 3 years with a window that got morning light. She told him about the apartment on a Tuesday by text at 9:51 p.m. Then 2 minutes later, "I think I might get a plant." He read it. He set his phone down. He picked it up. "Pothos," he wrote back, supposedly unkillable. "I killed the last one." "You were never home," he wrote. "Now you are." A long pause. Longer than usual. He waited the way he'd learned to wait, without filling the silence, without doing the invisible math, without managing the uncertainty into something smaller and safer. He just waited and trusted what he knew, and let the moment be exactly as large as it was. Her message arrived, "I am, aren't I?" Not a question, a realization, something arriving fully without conditions. "Yeah," he wrote. "You are." He put the phone down. He went to Lila's doorway. She was asleep, Gerald under her arm, dark curls on the pillow, her face doing the small, certain piece of a child who has decided the world is fundamentally okay. He stood there for a long moment in the quiet house. He thought about 3 years of survivable. He thought about a door he hadn't knocked on, and a woman who'd said, "That's not the wrong thing to look at," and a sand dollar given by a 7-year-old who understood that the giving part was easy once you noticed. He thought about what it meant to want something without a plan for it, to step toward something without knowing how it ended, to let the invisible math go quiet just for a moment, and trust that the things worth having were worth the uncertainty of reaching for them. He looked at his daughter. He thought she taught me this. She and Claire between them, one who showed him how to love without armor, and one who was showing him daily how to keep doing it after the armor felt necessary. He exhaled. The long kind. The one that meant something had set down what it had been carrying. He went back to the kitchen. He got a glass of water. He sat at the table where the shell collection was arranged on the windowsill. The sand dollar's twin, the heart-shaped rock, the sea glass in 3 colors, the quartz striped specimen Lila had presented to Sophie like evidence and kept a copy of for herself. He looked at his phone one more time. He opened a new search, best pothos varieties for low-maintenance care. He was going to buy 2. One for the apartment Sophie had just committed to. One for the kitchen windowsill that could use something living, something that required tending, something that meant he believed he was going to be here long enough to watch it grow. Some doors you walk through by accident. Some you open on purpose, knowing exactly what you're choosing it anyway with both hands. He had walked through the wrong door on a Saturday in June, with his daughter's hand in his, and his whole scaffolded, managed, survivable life arranged exactly as he'd built it. And on the other side, completely unplanned, was everything that came next.